On behalf of the Government of India, the Union Law Minister has been constantly attacking judiciary. So this is a cynical attempt to intervene in judiciary. So we have been seeing this. In fact, the Supreme Court has been repeatedly expressing concern over the increasing vacancy of judges. So the Supreme Court point of view expressed by the benches, two different benches of the Supreme Court in the recent past, is that the government is delaying the appointments. Government is not acting upon the recommendations of the collegium. So before I get into the details, let me make it very clear how our judges are appointed in India. The Constitution of India simply says the President of India, in consultation with the Chief Justice of India, will appoint judges. So this is the constitutional position. In 1993, the Supreme Court, in the famous judges case, has brought into effect the collegium system. The collegium consists of the Chief Justice of India and senior most judges of the Supreme Court. Well, the idea is that the judiciary should be allowed to appoint its own members because the Constitution believes in separation of powers, executive, legislature and judiciary. Judiciary enjoys constitutional autonomy, and the separation of powers is part of the basic structure of the Constitution. In the Keshavananda Bharati case, Supreme Court clearly adjudicated that even the Parliament doesn't have the power to amend the basic structure of the Constitution. But the criticism on the collegium system is this is leading to nepotism, and this is stifling the diversity in the appointment of judges. So when judges appoint judges, then that's not ethical. So therefore, there has been a demand to broad base the method for appointment of judges. The Government of India has brought in National Judicial Appointments Commission. Well, NJSC is an idea to diversify, to broad base the process and method for appointing judges. To that extent, it is a welcome feature. But what did government do is, it has ensured that the executive will have a greater say than judiciary in the judicial appointments. So this is against the basic structure of the Constitution. This is against the principle of separation of powers. So therefore, the Supreme Court in 2015 struck down the National Judicial Appointments Commission and restored the primacy of the collegium system. Since then, the Government of India has been delaying acting on the recommendations of the collegium. So the Supreme Court bench has recently expressed concern that as a result of this inordinate delay in acting upon the recommendations of the collegium, some of the best minds are not coming to judiciary. So given the controversy, some of them are dropping out. There is even an instance of a name recommended, the person recommended by the collegium, the government did not act and finally died. So as a result, the Supreme Court says that the judiciary is deprived of the best minds, and this is resulting in huge number of vacancies and humongous pendency of cases. Even the Union Law Minister in a reply to Parliament said that 5 crore cases are pending in Supreme Court, High Court, district and subordinate courts in India. It's not a small figure, it's an humongous number. So to be precise, it is 4.9 lakh crore cases, not lakh crores. So when 5 crore cases are pending, what is the meaning of administration of justice? Justice delayed is justice denied. That is the reason cases are pending for decades in Indian courts, and the common man has no access. So it affects the litigant in a very big way because the process itself is a punishment. Well, the Union Law Minister in his reply to Parliament said nearly 70,000 cases are pending in the Supreme Court itself. 70,000 cases are pending in Supreme Court itself, and 60 lakh cases are pending in High Courts only. 60 lakh cases are pending in high courts. So the concern is expressed by the Supreme Court, the concern is expressed by the Government of India. But the solution is quite different. The Supreme Court says this humongous pendency is a result of very large number of vacancies in the courts. Well, Government of India also acknowledges this quite interestingly. So the Union Law Minister told the Parliament that around 6,000 judges posts are pending in India. So from the Supreme Court, High Court and district courts, the figures we have given is little over 25,000 cases, judges posts are sanctioned strength, and over 19,000 judges are actually working, which leaves around 6,000 vacancies in judges. So until here the Supreme Court and Government of India agree. There is a huge vacancy of judges resulting in humongous pendency of cases. But what is the solution? The Supreme Court says this is a result of Government of India not acting on the recommendations of the collegium. Even if the Government of India sends the recommendation back to the court and the court reiterates their names, still the government is not working. Actually, the procedure is the government sends it back to Supreme Court for reconsideration, and after reconsideration, if the apex court recommends the same names, government is supposed to appoint them. But they are not doing. So the law minister goes to the extent of telling the Supreme Court in a meeting that, okay, let them appoint. Why should they send it to us? That is the level of political arrogance displayed unbecoming of a law minister. And the Vice President of India recently, when he became the Rajya Sabha chairman, advanced a very interesting theory. He says that the Supreme Court striking down National Judicial Appointments Commission NJAC in 2015 is a violation of parliamentary sovereignty. He says when the parliament has approved it, 16 state legislatures have approved it, how can Supreme Court strike it down? But he advances the theory of parliamentary sovereignty. But the Supreme Court in the famous Keshavananda Bharati case has clearly stated that the parliamentary sovereignty also has limits. It's not an absolute sovereignty in India. Parliamentary sovereignty ends when the basic structure of the constitution comes into effect. So the autonomy of judiciary, the separation of powers is a part of the basic structure of the constitution. Therefore, though the parliament has power to amend the constitution, though the people's sovereignty is expressed through parliament, but still the basic structure of the constitution cannot be altered. So now this fight continues. Yesterday in parliament, the law minister makes a very strange argument. He says the pendency of cases will not change unless the collegium system is revisited. So he clearly links, rather warns the apex court that the vacancy of judges will persist, pendency of cases will continue until Supreme Court accept the executive supremacy over judicial appointments. So the law minister has been openly advocating that the government should have power to appoint judges. We know what's happening with the agencies like CBI. Though there is a method of appointing the director of CBI, even the Chief Justice of India is part of the committee that appoints the CBI director. But we know how the things are happening. We know how enforcement directorate is being used for political vendetta. We also know how the Election Commission of India is also acting in a partisan manner. The Supreme Court, in a recent observation, has expressed concern over the way the Chief Election Commissioner was appointed. At a time when the constitutional offices are misused and rather abused, we can understand what will happen the moment executive gets control over judicial appointments. I am not telling that the collegium system is a healthy way. Certainly not. So the collegium system needs to be democratized. It needs to be expanded. The collegium system is a very narrow manner of recruiting judges. You can't expect few judges to decide entire Indian judiciary. I do agree with the concerns over collegiate system, but at the same time, prescribing executive power to appoint judges, the prescription of executive power to appoint judges is the cure worse than the disease, and it is unbecoming of the basic structure of the Constitution of India. Every attempt by the government of India to take on, to grab the power to appoint judges from the judiciary should be resisted by the democratic minded people of the country.